Hi, Tim. Hi, Tim. You're in the famous window again, I see.
Yes, I did. Indeed, I am.
Oh, and you got beautiful sound today. That's beautiful. Okay, Kevin is here. Yeah, you must have got a new microphone or something. You sound like you're an FM radio announcer.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Must be improvements in my voice.
Yes. Well, anyway, after Charles' dream last night, I can't really, I mean, I've been sort of almost giddy. That was a great dream he had,
Yeah,
you know.
I saw your note to.
Yes, I would like to see those drawings because I really think to me it's a lesson. Hi Gary, you finally got your internet going, I can see. Hey Kevin, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, it's late here, so yes.
Oh, yeah. Now where are you exactly?
Now I'm in the Philippines,
Oh,
so
in the Philippines. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, I guess it's a little late there.
yeah.
Or
So
early, one of the two. Late or early.
yeah, I sort
Yeah.
of
Oh,
you
Miles
guys
is,
side.
yes.
So, Kevin, what do you do?
Right now, I just I'm I I'm quarantined. I mean,
Yes.
everyone in the Philippines is quarantined, but actually, I just moved from. I'm half Norwegian, half Filipino, and I just came from Denmark, and I quit my job to I want to spend my time more in Asia.
Yeah. So du kan snacka norsk mega gott also?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm half, so yeah, I förstår norsk. So yeah,
Okay. All right.
I know you have some.
Yeah. Well, I have a cousin in Norway who always can't speak English. So, well, anyway, I just wanted to read this little thing. What I thought we'd do is just we review everything we've learned in active imagination and also everybody's personal experiences, you know. But you know they this one Linda Vacatura, and by the way, Jeffrey Raff said he might drop in, you know, not today but sometime. You know, I
Great.
told him just drop in sometime if he wants to come in. So we'll see. I mean, he has a medical issue. I didn't know that. And anyway, I asked if Linda could come on, and he said she's retired, but he said he might drop in at some point. But I mean, it would be nice. What I'd really like to hear is his personal story, you know, because it's pretty amazing. It's somewhat similar to Carlos Castaneda's, really, and that's what brought him to Jung.
Wow.
But anyway, here's Linda, who is his person he works with. Her guide, her Patrick, you know, says he says he says, you may call me Shiante, but as our relationship changes, so too might my name. As to who I am the heart of life, replies my guest. Thus the sea from which comes life shapes my form. However, do not let this form deceive you, for I have many forms and no form. Then my guest instructs me to close my eyes, and I feel as a radiance that pierces my soul in a bath of intense warm love. As heart, I come to you out of love, with love for you, and you will always know me by this love. As the heart of life, and this is that aliveness that Stuart speaks of, I'm also the center beyond centers. I appear always, and you will know me always by this love. As this heart of life, I'm also this center beyond centers. I appear to emerge from within the center of the hermaphrodite, and that's a combination of Hermes and Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Well, the one thing I really wanted to read is just this part. He says, "I am beyond all, in the center of all." He's saying he's beyond God. Really. He
My
says,
gosh.
yeah. He says, the heart of life that I am binds into relationships all parts of life. As the blood flows from the heart to nourish all parts of the body, and all the blood returns to being renewed, so do I. I am the real of life. I am the point from which all emerges, and I am all that emerged. I am evolution's impulse and urge to continually incarnate life into new form, just as the heart pumps forth fresh blood. I am without death. You know, this is, we had a little thing with Stuart this morning, and that was kind of what Patrick was saying too, is he says he's from life itself, he's life. And what life itself wants ego for is very interesting. The reason that life itself, or aliveness, and this thing that incarnates and calls itself life, calls itself love, calls itself the heart of life, or the light of nature, is the center of what we're trying to contact in active imagination. I mean, this is the one that we're supposed to have this relationship with.
And what does life want from ego?
It wants us to be the servants of life itself. It says it is life itself. Let's just read that one more time. It's so beautiful. I also want to hear what Patrick says about it, because he says pretty much exactly the same things. He says, I am the heart of life that binds into relationship all parts of life. As the blood flows from the heart to nourish all parts of the body, and the blood returns to the heart to be renewed, so do I. I am the real of life. I am the point from which all emerges. That would be the heart, or the center of centers. I am the point from which all emerges, and I am all that emerged. So, this is he's the one, and he's the many, and then he's in everything. So this is really is our center speaking to us, because we are part of this. We are the blood that flows from the heart to nourish all parts of the body, and the blood that returns to the heart to be renewed. I am the real of life. I'm the point from which all emerges, and I'm all that is emerged. I am evolution's impulse. Now that's really is, I think, the reason that life itself wants to contact ego, because we are a different type of evolution. We're the evolution of consciousness, the evolution of the God image, more than the evolution of the brain. That's not, I think they go hand in hand, but I think that the expansion of brain power is to be in service to the expansion of transpersonal consciousness. So in other words, if the brain gets very, very powerful, and the ego goes way, way away from nature and becomes very powerful, it is now an incredible dynamo which life itself can use to expand transpersonal consciousness in the outer world. Now, what do you guys think of that?
Sounds great. I'll take 2.
Yeah. Well, it's just sort of my intuition, but I'm trying to just wrap my head around this. I'm not trying to be dogmatic about it, but why? What is it,
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Because it's, as it seems that, in this age, with our frontal cortex having, gotten, far more developed, that, that people as a whole are far, far away from God, or even the numinous, if you will, that, it can also result in extreme materialism.
Yeah, that's when it is turning and turning and in widening gyre. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. Mere anarchy has come upon the world. The idea is the farther away the falcon is from the falconer, if it can still hear it, the more powerful, the more tension is built up between the falconer and the falcon. The more opposite they are, the more tension builds up, the more powerful is the dynamo in which transpersonal consciousness can evolve. But but the brain power, which is this amazing thing that's developing now, is something that is spinning off, as Gary says, into what Edward Edinger said was the devil is the personification of the ego archetype. It's the ego which is as an archetype that's not related to the self is the devil. The ego unrelated to its source is the devil. Now, what do you think about that?
I'll just relate it to a presentation I was part of recently with Dr. Darianne Pictet from Zurich. Anyway, she presented 4 stages of Anima, from Eve to Helen to Mary to Sophia, and then this encompassing Anima Mundi, which is a world encompassing anima. And I might be not entirely correct, but essentially even our genders are harmonized. The masculine and feminine are harmonized. So thinking of the Anima Mundi maybe as the Trinity as well, the concept of the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, those coming together too, and especially if we give the Holy Spirit the feminine pronoun, she. So, and then we've got Einstein's E equals mc squared. So E is like this energy. Maybe that's the Anima Mundi. Maybe that's the what you were just reading summarized, and you have material, matter, light squared. Anyway, just connecting those if they do connect.
Yeah, well, hi, Stuart and Ivan. We were just reviewing what I thought we were going to do today is just kind of review active imagination that we got out of ally work, and to just say where we are, and basically I think it's more of a how-to than just maybe everybody's experience on what they've been doing on active imagination. But what I was just commenting on, Stuart, was something that Patrick just said. Hey, Steve. Hi, Steve. This was from The Wounded God. This was very similar to what Patrick said this morning about that we are life itself, that Patrick is life itself, and that life itself is that is the well, let's get the transcript of it, but it was the this is the connecting link between the inner and the outer world, and between all beings in the outer world and all beings in the inner world and all beings in the invisible world. And this is what Linda's Patrick said about it. Linda's, he says, I am beyond all and the center of all. I am the heart of life that binds into relation all parts of life. As the blood flows from the heart to nourish all parts of the body, and the blood returns to be renewed to the heart, so do I. I am the real of life. I am the point from which all emerges. I'm the point from which all emerges. And I am all that has emerged at the same time. I'm the impulse and urge he says, I'm the point. I forgot, I might have screwed this up. I think delivered. I am evolution's impulse and the urge to continuously incarnate life into new form, just as the heart pumps forth fresh blood, and I am without death. Now, the idea, the only thing I was bringing up, and it's a pretty arcane point here, is why does life itself want to have this relationship with ego? And why is ego so ambivalent about it and doesn't really care? You know, I mean, and is somewhat apathetic about it. You know, I mean, there's a few people who want to have a relationship, and I think most of us do to varying degrees. But whether we're serious about it is another question, or how serious anybody's about it. But what happened right now, and Gary kind of summarized it, was that this brain is developing like a monster, you know, and it gets farther and farther away from nature. And the more powerful the brain becomes, the more of a dynamo it is for evolving life itself. But it doesn't know that that's its task.
I'm thinking, you know, what motivates the virus that has us all locked down? What's motivating the expansion of the universe, you know?
Well, that's kind of a sort of that's sort of a mysterious random aspect of life itself. You know, there's a mysterious random aspect of life itself, and then there's a purposeful part of life itself. Now, what were you going to say, Stuart?
I was just, some.
Uh-oh, you're frozen.
Are we back?
Yeah, you're back now.
I'd just be watching thoughts come in and go at times, and I wouldn't really be following them too much. I'd just be watching them arise and go. But I noticed one the other night about how this whole sort of ally energy, or the Patrick experience, or whatever way you want to describe that, has been the voice of the Anima. It's like okay, so a man relates to life through the Anima, in a sense, and the Anima responds. But this is a much more direct response. You know, circumventing the ego. It's not coming, in a way, my dialogue about, you know, what I experience in my psyche is all coming through my ego. It's filtered through my filters. Whereas the ally experience doesn't have that. It's direct. It's coming straight out of life itself. So it's you know, it's the father aspect within the mother. Manifesting in order to guide, or to do what the father does, to bring a sense of self-knowing within that field in a much more alive way than through us. That was you know, I just noticed those thoughts happened there last week. They were sort of coming through. I didn't really pay much attention to them, but I said, right, well, that happened. I'll remember that one, come back to it later on. Just want to add that in.
Well, the thing that we're longing for is telling us that it's the point from which everything's emerged and all that's emerged. And yet it has an aspect that it's the heart, and it is in love with life. There's this celebration and dance of everything that's alive. And its vehicle of consciousness is the ego. So this beautiful symphony of that it is planning and wanting to present on stage needs the ego to be its vehicle, and yet the ego is reluctant and doesn't seem to know that that's what it's for. What is it? Why it's here? You know. And so this is this. Go ahead. Who's
the like when in that dialogue you read out there about the you know, I am the emergence of all that is, like life relating with life, and then spontaneously arises this being, this psychoidal being, saying that he is all that that there is. I see that as like okay, so what happens next?
Yes.
That cycloidal being influences the ally, influences the ego in some capacity, and then the ego benefits or is evolved through that experience. The like if the ally wasn't to be personified, if it was to remain as it is, as a field of consciousness, emerging consciousness, it would in some way be the ego would be the ego would arise out of that in some way. Whereas to bring it into being as a separate entity within itself is nearly to talk to our emerging self before it influences us. Anyway, yeah.
Well, that's the purpose, I think, of act. Oh, did somebody else have something to say?
Well, one thing that Dr. Pictet mentioned that Miles talked about in this presentation on the 4 aspects of the anima is that the anima doesn't traffic with the ego. That I'm still struggling to understand this, but it makes sense to me that you know, the anima is an inner figure and will give it the ego images, but does not speak directly to the ego.
Yeah, I mean now he's talking about the feminine anima.
Yeah.
That's unusual. I mean, I've not heard that before. But
Well,
I mean, I don't know. But the anima is doesn't speak directly. I have to read about that a little more. But you know, the anima is the spiritual aspect of the Great Mother. You know, I mean, she's that Sophia, Kali, and the Great Mother are the biological axis of the feminine, and then the anima is also the center of the Great Mother. The anima, the Great Mother, and then the negative anima of addiction are the spiritual pole, and the anima is the bridge to the self, the personal self, who we're supposed to merge with at death. You know, Kevin saw his self in the reflection of on a store window. You know, a more indigenous aspect of himself, but that was the self. Patrick saw his personal self while he was standing on a lake, and this is classic experience in this type of work of active imagination, the expansion of the imaginal world. And Henry Corbin will tell you about it. When he sunk into the reflection on the lake, consciousness expanded. Do you want to talk about that, Stuart, or not?
Yeah, I was just about to jump in there. I think it's very important that we look at our own process in this in relation to it, because if I, you know, me standing before my anima, that field of consciousness that is the anima, it's receptive, and it'll take whatever image I carry within myself to it. So any of my process, any of my onward process will appear as a reflection of life itself to me. So it's like I can't get through my own, it's like Narcissus, you know, staring at his own image. He can't get through his own self-image to be able to see the truth of life itself. The truth of life itself lies deeper than his own self-image. So he has to work through all of his own stuff before the reality, before the anima can really present a clearer view of its reality to him.
Another aspect of the anima it's the earthing of the masculine. You know, I mean, it brings the masculine to earth. You know, masculine is spirit in need of the earth, and the earth is, I mean, the feminine is earth in need of spirit. You know, yet they're both of us have the anima. So the anima is also eros too. I mean, she's very rich. You know, the animus is a little less, is a little more utilitarian, I think. You know, it's all about the only thing it can give birth to it is its own thoughts. But the thing I was just wanting to review was is the amazing things that I've of this thing that we're trying to contact in an active imagination is incredibly beautiful, you know, and yet we're and I feel it, you know, everywhere is there's an apathy about it. There's a who cares, you know? I mean, what's on TV tonight?
Say,
I mean,
you mentioned Kevin's vision of seeing his reflection in the mirror or in the
yes.
window.
Mhm.
Can he talked about that? I'm not familiar with that story.
Oh, well, Kevin's dream was that he was in a mall. He comes down with the mother. She goes to the place of healing, the hospital. He goes outside and he sees in the reflection in the window a more indigenous aspect of himself, one that is closer related to the elemental side of himself, looking at him. And you know, I don't know. I have heard a lot of dreams like that where it supposedly is the self looking at you, or you're seeing for the first time your inner personal self, which is the divine within you, you know. And Patrick saw it down in the lake. Did you have anything to say about that, Kevin?
Yeah, I can perhaps just quickly mention anima, just to get the feel of the anima. I mean, if the attraction towards a woman makes you energized and makes
Yes.
you don't want to eat, and it makes you create things you couldn't or wouldn't create, and that's that's being in touch with the anima, or
She
it
excites
works.
it. Yeah, she excites and fascinates. So she is the bridge to the inner world because she's so fascinating. She's also the bridge to the outer world because she's so fascinating. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I jump in on that? That's really interesting because if you take it just a little bit further, okay, so as a man, I meet a woman and her animus stimulates my anima unconsciously.
Yes, it's a quaternity.
Exactly.
Animus, man and woman are all working at the same time.
So in a sense, I get to do my best work when I'm standing beside a woman with a strong animus. I am pulled into expression, pulled into my creative side, and I produce. Now, if you take away that worldly effect, that relationship of man-woman, and you put a man standing in front of life itself through the anima is stimulated by the father aspect within life itself, in exactly the same way as I am stimulated by the woman who happens to catch my attention based on all of my swallowed mother images.
Yes.
You see, so the anima is reflecting
Beautiful.
my biographical experiences back to me all of the time until I get to a place where I sufficiently know myself well enough to be able to set that aside and look more deeply into my own nature, in which case then the anima ceases to be stimulated by what's in this world. It stops reflecting my own surface psychology back to me and instead starts to manifest the deeper aspects of my psychology, which is the archetypal end of things, if you like. The backside of the stage starts to get its moment. So
I think that's an aspect of how life itself is going to bring us into relationship with it, bring the ego into relationship with it, is by its fascinating luminous quality, which attracts us and has an irresistible quality, you know. So the solution for the apathy of the ego is for the unconscious to be incredibly fascinating and numinous. So it has it has this lyrical quality of music and of art and of all things beautiful. It's the source of the paint that colors the whole world. You know, it's this it's the water of life. It's the you know, so that's its fascinating quality. That's why the ego would want to do all this work of active imagination to develop a second source of consciousness within its awareness. Now that's the whole goal of active imagination, is to develop an articulate
But Craig,
center of consciousness within you.
the person has to be worn out by life to a certain extent.
Yes, there's an aspect of hitting bottom. Yeah. If
So
you don't hit bottom, you're not
so
going to.
we see the apathy within the ego towards this work, but the apathy in a sense is the deadness within ourself. So we need
Yes.
to enliven that deadness through
Yeah.
our own inner relationships. You know, the stimulation to bring something to life can only come from within. Prior to that stimulation arising from within, the constellation is purely external. So I will be in service to the world, and the world will be my God.
Yes.
So the ego will, that part of the ego will remain dead to myself, if you like, dead to this self.
Yes, dead to the inner world. And
Yeah.
and usually the only way, there's two things that answer that. And then maybe I'd like to get Steve and everybody else's comments too, is the often this work cannot begin without a near-death experience, without having ego been totally annihilated through it. I'm going to die. I'm dead now. I know I'm dead, you know, and then suddenly you survive it through it. And then suddenly you've woken up and you're ready for the inner life, you know. I mean, and you had to actually have to die while you're alive before you can be ready for this inner life. I mean, that was what soldiers who went into war where it was potentially incredibly dangerous situation. If they went in saying, I'm not surviving this battle, I know I'm going to be killed today, were operated a lot more efficiently than the one who says, oh, I can't, this is, you know, what about my mama and my girlfriend, you know? I mean, then they would be the one that would not operate efficiently. And then the other aspect I want to say is this is what every dream tells us. The ego can't help you now. Every single dream that you have, that you got a test that you can't pass. You're in a maze you can't get out of. You can't find the door out of someplace. You're in a car that you can't control. You're in the back seat of a car that's driving itself. You know, the ego can't help me now. This means that to get ready for the inner life, you have to let go of the ego, and either through a near-death experience or through a realization, which is very difficult to have.
But Craig, there's you know, again saying, okay, well, that's there, right? Now what next? So for the ordinary person who's interested in this area, it's sort of a gray area. It's like, well, am I working on my own stuff, or am I working on the development of this sort of the manifestation of the self within me? And there's always a parallel process going on between those two things. So if somebody gets themselves into therapy, the therapist is going to hold both poles. They're going to hold the spiritual father, mother, and they're going to hold the personal father, mother for that person. And similarly, if the person doesn't go the therapeutic route, but instead continues on through life, life will hold those two poles to the extent that the person is able to relate with them. So, you know, in the event of a crisis occurring in the person's life, that is the breaking down of the personal nourishment. You know, my needs are not being met. I'm being thrown into a regressed place of my needs are not going to be met. I'm going to die. So the ego sort of falters sufficiently long enough for the person to change the nature of their own projection, not deliberately so. The projection changes, and then they seek help from a higher place, not from the physical mother, but from the heavenly mother father dynamic. They, you know, if you can't help me, God help me, I think. And
I think the whole design of this is to produce this incredibly strong ego, but then have a enantiodromia, you know, reversal mechanism that forces it to return back to where it came, you know, so it can now be the servant after it's become so strong. So how can we thwart and destroy this marvelous ego we created enough so it will come back to us, you know?
Yeah,
I think that's kind of the
maybe-
process.
through association.
if I can just say something very quick. I think there was a meeting that should have happened, which never took place, and that was between Carl Jung and Ramana Maharaji. Because I think Carl Jung, what he did was to provide a roadmap basically, but Maharaji was like straight to the core, straight to the life force, straight to the. There was no ego dissection, which for Jung is important to keep intact. But I also feel like, because I'm listening to the questions, like what all of these different structural components means, and we can all go through that obviously, but there is also another way, which is no way basically, and which Ramana Maharaji was on that way. And it's just so sad, like when I hear that Carl Jung did not meet him, because if he did meet, I think it would be, it would be somewhat of a different story.
Well, the one thing Carl Jung told Eric Neumann, you know, which is very interesting too, is he said this. He says, God does not want a bunch of dreary little mirrors that are just reflecting his own face back to him. You know, but he doesn't want billions of dreary little mirrors reflecting his own reflection back to him. What he wants is what this is saying, that I am the evolution of the life impulse. I need a vehicle. I need a strong vehicle. I don't want someone to return to the womb and return to the cosmic sea and be a dewdrop in the cosmic sea. I want the man and his ego to be the spearhead of the evolution of the life impulse. Now, not of biology, but of a transpersonal, incarnate consciousness which exists in the outer world. Now, I don't know, does that clear? Or, I mean, am I sound like an idiot? Can somebody?
Yeah, I think that's it. That's exactly it. That we are co-creators with God.
Yes.
And that we have been given this divine gift of creativity that is not shared by any of the other animals. And the universe as it is unfinished.
Mm-hmm.
And we are presented this opportunity on the stage of evolution to be on the very, very cutting edge of evolution. So a single human with a good idea, I think, is what expands the universe and pushes out the space that allows life to move into that new space. So
It's a rediscovery of the imaginal world. You know, what one guy says is, when the art first came in the world, it was an expansion of consciousness, the imaginal world. He says that humans should be called Homo either Homo mythicus or Homo imaginus or whatever. It's their idea that the person of the the purpose of the ego is to be the vehicle of the expansion of consciousness through symbols and through the evolving of transpersonal consciousness in the outer world.
Greg, within the experience I had the other night, which I told you about,
Yes.
where the Great Mother came and I received this blessing. Within that, there was the awareness that the blessing is received at all levels within my conscious stream simultaneously. It doesn't separate me out as a point in the line. The blessing is given. So everything that comes to life within me and everything that I am within as part of life receives the same opportunity or the same raising up or the same enlivening within its own being. So who's to say that my microbes have not evolved if I evolve? Do you know, who's to say that the benefit? I absolutely believe that if my consciousness changes, my relationship to others within me changes, and their relationship with their own self changes as a result of all of that. So it's a domino effect through time, outside of time.
By the way, yeah, it has a roadmap too. The roadmap is the astrological ages. You know, we're leaving Pisces and moving into the age of the water bearer. You know, after we leave water, we move into Capricorn, which is the goatfish. That's a being which simultaneously lives at the highest peak and in the deepest depths in the same being. You know, and the water carrier is the one that carries the wisdom of the Great Mother and the collective unconsciousness with it, and feeds life itself. I mean, waters life itself with this water that it carries after it emerged from the sea of unconsciousness as a fish in Pisces. Now, so there's an aspect here of growth. What this life itself wants is a growth.
Yeah, but
not just to be reflected.
But growth is always going to be experienced by me, the part in me that is growing. So we can talk about an astrological point in time, we can talk about change, but it's all relative to my perception. If we could see through the eyes of the other, if we could experience life through the eyes of life itself, we wouldn't be experiencing the same movement, evolution, because it's already done.
Yeah, but it wants it to incarnate in the outer world. It wants this to be. It is not satisfied with it being only latent and potential. It wants it to be manifest in the outer world. And by the way, Patrick chewed my ass out today, and he told me, Craig, you're looking at it from your little walled-in point of time here. Don't you're making me impatient. Well, let's hear what other people have to say. I would like to hear what everybody has to say, and then I just wanted to give a few of the hot button words that Jeffrey Raff had about active imagination, and ask people if they're having any problems with it too. And then I want to continue with our work with Stuart on what he's doing with Patrick. But I thought just for a quick shift in gears, we'd go through Barbara Hanna's book. She's really the father of active imagination. It's really just a story of some other people who have done active imagination in history, you know. And so it's pretty easy reading. And then we can go back maybe to this follow-on of ally work, which is called Healing the Wounded God. But Steve, do you always are the best question asker. Tell us that we're missing the point.
Oh no, I'm not going to tell you that. That's for sure. I appreciate the honor, but no, I'm just absorbing and listening. So I that's really all. I've got nothing to contribute.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fine. If you do, just speak up. How about you, Ivan? What you look all wide awake.
I have young kids. I don't sleep a lot.
Yeah, you got up a little early, I guess.
Yeah. So something as questioning was this idea of only not questioning, but not understanding fully was this idea of having a near-death experience in order to connect with the anima. Do you think that the near-death experience is the mechanism via which you understand that the ego is a construct and the self lies elsewhere, and that could be understood through other means? Or do you think it truly takes the experience of something like that in order to fully make that connection, if that question makes any sense?
You just expressed Jung's realization that made him you just said it out loud. You said that what his realization was, he realized he was not the master in his own house. That was his guiding principle. Okay, if I'm not the master in my own house, who is? And what is my own house? You know, and who owns this house? You know, if it's not me, you know. So, and the house is his personal existence. And so now, as far as the near-death experience, it's just, how do you get the attention of this apathetic ego to be the vehicle, the living tabernacle, the living place of the divine in the outer world, which is supposedly, you know, you can just say, well, the hell with that, but it's the purpose, the ontological purpose of the human is to be the incarnation of all this latent potential astrological ages, which still have to slowly develop, slowly unfold. They're not going to blossom all at once. They blossom, you know, like that, you know, and it evidently is not something that can happen in a flash, you know, and so that is as far as the near-death experience, the what happens in a near-death experience, and how can you replicate this without having a near-death experience, is you die. You think you're gonna, this is it, I'm gone, and that somehow you survive it. Well, you're never, after that, suddenly a life takes on a completely different quality. You know, sometimes you actually experience death and you're not afraid of it anymore. So, and this is something Patrick says over and over again. And if we can send out those transcripts, I mean, he just says that, you know, the way of looking at things, Patrick's way of level of looking at things and our level of looking at things differ primarily in the fact that he knows what death is and we don't, you know. And if you do know what death is, then you're not so worried about who you are, but what you are. And what you are is to be the incarnation in this life. And I think that's what, you know, my first kind of puzzling question was, why does life itself want to contact this ego, which is so ignorant and apathetic of it? And its only attraction is that it is the most fascinating, numinous, and the only thing in life that will heal this broken, shattered ego, which someday is going to experience its own brokenness and shatteredness. And it's the healing thing. Go ahead, Stuart.
Craig, I think what Ivan says is really interesting, because if you go back and ask yourself, well, what is the ego? Okay, this, you know, do we have to go through a near-death experience? What happens to the ego when it passes, when it's exposed to the experience of its own demise? And it lives on throughout that experience as the observer of its own demise. So to, you know, I think it's a whole area of study. It's a whole area of practice that we don't generally meet, you know, in our day-to-day living, is, you know, the experience of our dying. And yet it's essential, because otherwise all of our needs, all of our relating is anchored in position according to how I've grown up, how I've been in the past. I make myself concrete through my belief in the ego being a concrete thing. Even the way we relate to it in conversation, it's as a singular concrete thing. And yet it's not. It's a complete process of attachments and desires and belief systems that can be adapted, taken down, modified, educated, and killed while we still exist. So what are we existing within when our ego is being hammered? Once we sort of have gotten through the suffering bit, which is really our complaint at being killed, you know, once we've sort of been silenced in the process, and we're still watching, you know, it's like, well, here I am, I should be in pain, and I'm no longer in pain. What's that about? Do you see? And to the extent that we've separated from our beingness, is it an out-of-body experience, or is it within still within body experience? Do you see? So it's a whole area of conversation and study that could go on for hours and days. It's brilliant, but I think it's you know, we go through it very quickly. A sentence, there you go, it's done. Well, no, it's much bigger than that.
So
go ahead, Ivan. Yeah.
Oh, the reason I asked was what I struggled with the ally work and the active imagination work is really basically part of the basic part of it, where I feel like, you know, I've meditated for some time, so I'm not great at it, but I'm okay at it. But I have a hard time getting to the point of, I feel like my ego is still filtering things out. I don't feel like I'm actually making a connection here. And to me, my understanding, I'm really new to this stuff, but like, I almost think of the ego as this mechanism of, it's this construct we have for survival in the physical world. And in order to communicate with the anima or the unconscious, it's a relaxation of the ego. And so I'm kind of wondering if, sorry, I'm having a hard time formulating this, but I feel like my ego is, even though I'm consciously trying to make this connection, I'm still struggling with like a filter in some sense, where it doesn't want to be hearing it.
Well, just a quick, I think, you know, if you actually sincerely do at least the first 6 exercises that Jeffrey Raff outlines there, he has a way of obliterating that filter. And the way of obliterating that filter is through us, that part of the quieting of the ego, the quieting of the critical function, but also through pretending, you know, through pretending that you are the other side. And the easiest way to do that, to start out with, is not with something as amazing as a psychoidal being, but as a figure in your dreams. So you or something in you that you have a great interest in, hopefully that is an unconscious content, some aspect of your dream, or dreaming on the dream. That's what Jung called it, dreaming on the dream. You know, go in and start. It doesn't even have to be one figure in the dream, but you've had a very interesting dream. And I find the best way to do this myself. First of all, you want to have he says it's extremely important, and he says this in every single one of his exercises, is to have an intent and a focus. You don't do this, just go in there and wait for, you know, the fruit to come to you. You know, he says that you go in and say, you have a specific question at the top of your page. I find it's best for myself. Now, Jeffrey Raff does this, and I know that, you know, Stuart doesn't do it this way. A lot of other people don't do it this way, but his way of doing it is through dialogue. Okay. And that means that he has the ego is going to type, you know, a question. And then he says, then he goes into the pretending mode. I am this other being. I mean, I'm not just going to let the other being, I'm not just going to start typing what the other being says. You can do that, but he says first he wants to go in. He wants to imagine what that other being looks like in the unconscious. What does it look like? What does it feel like? And then I want to look at myself through its eyes. And while you're looking at yourself through its eyes, now type the answer. And you do that over and over again, you know. And as you do that, it isn't going to be as real the first time it is as it is the 100th time you do it, you know. It's like, you know, your first violin lesson, you're not going to sound very, very musical, you know, but, you know, on your 100th violin lesson, you're almost listenable, you know, and on your 1000th, you'll be a virtuoso. But if you really, now the second 7 exercises, he's getting into the real high end work, and he doesn't even give much instructions on those. But the 6 ones he calls the first conjunctio, which is the union of ego with the unconscious. Okay, and it doesn't have to be an ally. Ally is a pretty ambitious for us rope climbers. You know, we don't have a ladder, we don't have wings to fly up to the spirit world. We have to do it hand over hand. And so the best entrance to that I have are unconscious contents that you know are genuine. And that would be a dream that you had that was somewhat numinous. Go ahead, Stuart, you have something.
Great, yeah, I do. I would say as well, alongside that, I think it's really important to do your grief work.
Look shadow work. Yeah,
grief
and shadow. Yeah.
Grief in particular is part of your shadow, but to focus on the grief of not getting, not having, everything that's missing in your life that you want can bring you into your grief. It's grounded in your grief, in this big ocean of grief, which would bring you right back to the very beginning. And you're not trying to obliterate the ego so much as create the ego's filter. A filter with it's like educating your ego to play the piano, educating your ego into a skill. Same as when you described about meditating. You know, well, you had to learn that, and now you're fairly proficient at it. So how did that happen? How did you gain proficiency? In the same way, when we go into our grief, first time we go near it, we bounce off it. We don't get into it at all. So gradually, by approaching our own grief through writing, dancing, moving, speaking, whatever way you want to do it, sitting on a rock in nature, it doesn't matter. Find your own path into it. But it's another method to be able to sort of teach the ego to go beyond the ego.
Burn off all superfluities, they say. Burn off all the baggage that you have. And once there's no baggage left. Go ahead. Yes, Kevin.
Yes, I was thinking of what Ivan says in terms of ego, just purely sort of biological. It is sort of also a biological construct, but it's a vessel for consciousness.
Yes.
Consciousness cannot die. I mean, you're experiencing a humanized version of the consciousness, which is ego with its construct. But even if you destroy the ego, what happens is that you're destroying the humanized consciousness. But the consciousness itself cannot die because it's pure energy, pure spirit. That's my version. I don't know, but so what you're doing is that you are using the humanized consciousness and sort of trying to bridge with obviously figure archetypes, but the archetypes should not be identified with. You should just relate to its content. And I think Greg already mentioned how to do that. Yes, and I don't know, like for me, it's automatic writing because I'm not imaginal. Like I am not,
yes.
You know, I am introverted thinking dominant. And so writing for me, but yeah, start with the figure in dreams. And once the archetype constellates, then you have, then archetype speaks for itself, basically. They are no longer just simple complexes.
My experience, Ivan, is that if I do it with a dream, and if I do it with pretending, You know, if I try to be the other telling me what the dream means, you know, or, you know, I have actually got a figure. I don't think it's the ally, but I just call her Barbello. You know, she's this, she comes from the immortal realm of Barbello. You know, supposedly that's where Judas says in the Gospel of Judas, when he first sees Jesus, he says, "I know who you are. You come from the immortal realm of Barbello," and she's the goddess of four. You know, but anyway, I developed a relationship with her. I can't tell you why, because I didn't know much about her before I heard her name in a dream. You know, but what I would say, Ivan, is this: is the way to create a blessed hour, which doesn't seem so dead and so ego bound in when you're doing your active imagination, is to work with dream images to begin with, because they're always numinous, you know, and then also try this. If you go through his 6 exercises, what he's really doing is telling you how to awaken this active imagination so it actually isn't all dead, you know, and it is through pretending that you're the other ally, having an intent and a focus. Don't listen to the inner critic that tells you this is all nonsense, and just keep being persistent. And what you're doing as you're developing these things is you are developing an organ of perception. You know, you're developing the organ of perception. And so what's happening as you're what the muscle you're developing as you're doing this is a way of being able to develop some kind of a relationship with the unconscious that becomes more real every time you do it. Every time you do it, the unconscious becomes a little bit more manifest. I mean, Stuart was speaking of manifesting the unconscious in the outer world in a personified form. You know, I'm doing it with this being I call Barbello, but I don't think she's manifest yet, but I just say to hell with it. I'm going to act as if she is, you know, and I just keep working that muscle. And I'm going to do, I mean, what you're doing is developing an organ of perception to the imaginal world. Now, I believe sincerely, if you just take those first 6 lessons and have them be the focus of every active imagination for 6 days, and then start over at the first one and go through it another 6 times, and then start over at the first one and go through it another 6 times, and do that a few times, that you start to find out, have a little bit of a structure of what is the goal here, and what am I doing, and how can I not just waste my time? How can I make this a productive use of my how can I actually, you know, I see people in the health club who don't know how to use the exercise machine, and you know, they're doing a pull-up machine, and they're thinking it's a leg machine, you know. So you kind of have to have know how the machine works a little bit. But anyway, how about Miles or Gary or Tim? Do you have any comments on your problems with active imagination? Or
I don't know. I had a couple of things. One, I was going to throw in, you know, for me, I pretty much have to do a meditation before it.
yes.
And I found, you know, Stuart's comments on, you know, bringing aliveness into that, you know, for me, I usually feel it in my solar plexus, and it spreads the heart, and it might spread from there. But, you know, that really helps. But, you know, Stuart said something about, you know, going to your grief. And I had a couple of questions
Yes,
about
that's
that.
so
because,
important.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, in one way, you know, grief is good because, you know, it allows us to realize how much of what we think is important actually has no importance. So, you know, it helps, you know, so that can like suppress the ego. But at the same time, you know, grief can also be the type of thing that, you know, where you can get, you know, a poor me type of response. You know, where you feel like, you know, you're missing a part of life because of, you know, what has occurred. So I was just curious to get maybe a little more from Stuart on this.
Yeah.
Let's say you're wounded. If you've been wounded as a child somehow.
Mhm. Sure.
There's working consciously with grief, not unconsciously with grief. So as you work consciously with grief, you all the time have a sense of your own self. It's an emotion that we can experience, and it's also a very physical experience within us as well. So as we go into it consciously, we can give it expression. We can animate it. We bring aliveness back into the deadness that the grief has become for us, because the grieving place in us is a very dead place. So slowly, by nibbling around the edges, as it were, not jumping into the center of it, but by acquainting ourselves with our own grief, we can slowly sort of enliven that part of ourself which is no longer tied into things, no longer dependent on things. And you know, what's the advantage of working with grief? It gives us independence. It gives us back our own sense of well-being within ourselves, that we can go on, that we can survive, that we can endure. You see, there's all these sort of qualities that we take for granted, and yet they're not conscious. So we make all these conscious. So you know, what's the benefit of all of that? Why would all of that relate back to the ally work? Because it helps us to form a belief about what we know. It helps us to form a belief about who we are in relation to the work. So you know, by going over the exercises, as Craig said, maybe 6 or 7 times, what's the purpose in doing that, other than us getting to be we gain a familiarity of the ground, and we also gain a familiarity of ourselves. So the self-knowing and the knowing the ground are 2 vital parts of the process. To see what is progression, what you know, if I talk about my own progression, what do I need to have in order to experience this thing that I call progression? Well, I need to see myself progressing. So in order to have that experience, I need to be able to see where I'm at. Do you see? So then working constructively, you know, in a systematic way, to have a strategy, as it were, as to how am I going to approach this book or this experience, to have some sort of strategy worked out. Well, I'm going to do an exercise each night before I go to bed. Before I go to sleep, I'm going to make a point, 10 minutes, I'm going to do this. That builds up into knowledge, self-knowing, a belief system about myself. So the whole thing combined, including this sort of going into my grief and having a look at how I've been disappointed by life, it's part of the overall strategy that has been given down by those who have walked the path before me. See, maybe I don't need to fully understand the entire method before I set out on the journey, but I would say it's good advice. But don't jump into the, you know, if you can't swim, don't go out in a boat and jump off the side of the boat into the ocean. You know, learn how to swim first before you jump off the boat. It makes sense.
You know, Ivan, you've got some unanswered questions, and if it was me, what I would do right off the bat, that would be numinous, and I know would be numinous to me, would I'd want to know how come my grandma's house doesn't have any exterior walls on it. I want to know why. Somebody's got, still don't know why. I want to go into that dream, and I want to go talk to his grandmother's house has no exterior walls, and there's a feminine presence in there that's the consort of the father that is not welcoming him, and he just came from a pastoral Eden in a Model T which had no room for him and only went a block, and then he comes to the house of the mother's mother, not the father, and it has no exterior walls in it, you know? Well, my first active imagination, until I'm done, I need to know the answer. Why doesn't this house have any exterior walls? That is a baffling question, but it also seems to me a vital question I want to know. You know,
That was
now
what I was
to
trying
me
to
that,
answer. That's
yeah.
that's really validating that you brought that up.
Well, yeah, and I'm just saying that if that was my dream, that would be, let me tell you something. Sometimes dream work and active imagination might seem dreary, but after you're done and you think about it later, it shines, you know. And I'll tell you one other thing you can do, that this is active imagination without meditation, is to draw it and color it. Active imagination is painting, drawing, and coloring unconscious contents. Okay. Now, this is doing it in a wordless fashion, you know, but maybe it doesn't need words, you know, maybe, and you know, Jung, you know, they have a center at the Jung Institute with hundreds of thousands of such paintings done by his patients. And he could take any one of them and tell them the story of their whole life. You know, he did that with Christiana Morgan, by the way, you know, in the vision seminars. Just looked at her paintings, it could tell her everything about herself. You know, so there's another form of active imagination, of drawing, painting, but I think you need to do it with unconscious images all the time. You know, you can sometimes do mandalas and something. I've never really gotten a mandala. Jung used to do a different one every day, but you know, if there's always 4 parts in it, he always said, make it put a lot of libido into it, you know, and of course you want to do that without, you want to leave the marine boots outside the door. That's what Tim does. He had a drill sergeant in the artist studio with him, and so to try to keep him out of there, he would take a pair of marine boots, set them out the side the door, and slam it, you know, so the marine was not in his room with him. But I would say, to me, Tim, Ivan, that dream about the exterior walls is a great unanswered question. Miles or Tim, do you have any comments on, have you tried any active imagination? Or Tim, you do it all the time if you're using unconscious images in your art. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have the same problem. My muscles just are not very robust. And so I go into the process and I understand how to do it, but it's very hard to be able to you know, do the whole repetition. I oftentimes will start and then I sort of get I get tired, or I kind of run out of energy to pursue the conversation. Or it comes, what often happens with me is I'll start the conversation and it starts to take a turn, and then I feel like I have to stop and think about it for a while. And I don't think that's the right attitude. I think the right attitude is to just keep going and think about it later.
Yeah, especially if you're doing the other side of it. But I'll tell you, I'm actually going to, I'm following my own advice. I am going to, you know, I've been doing active imagination for a couple of years. I start out with just a meditation, and that's a vision, has some visionary aspect. Then I do about you know, Raf is saying you should do about 30 minutes a day, you know, but his first 6 exercises, I'm just going to do them in cycle. I can do it on anything I want. I can do it on why there's no walls in the house, but I'm going to use his 6 exercises. And there's some of them that are so wonderful. I mean, the 2 I want to mention too, in particular, is the one where he and this ties in with what Stuart has experienced, is where Poimander, who is the guide or the Patrick of Hermes Trismegistus, you know, who's the father of alchemy, the writer of the Emerald Tablets, gave him his knowledge through his giving him his light, which was aliveness, or the lumen natura. Now, this I learned also from Stuart, is when I'm in doing my active imagination. Now, I first do a meditation that I want somebody like Poimander to give me the light of, well, I call it the lumen natura, but it's the light of nature. I want that to be I want to be in that state of aliveness, you know. Now, Stuart has a wonderful exercise too, as an intuitive thinking person. He showed me that if I put my fingertips together, he says, what do I feel, you know? And I said, well, I feel all kinds of consciousness starting to come into being in my fingertips. And he says, Craig, that's intuition. Okay, well, what he was saying is I needed to use the feeling and sensation functions. Well, sensation is my inferior function. And I said, yes, you were hitting the nail on the head. So I'm, in all of my active imaginations, I'm using the intuitive thinking functions. I need to use the sensation and feeling functions as well. You know, so how do I do that? Is a question I don't have an answer.
Craig, I have to respond.
Yes.
Can you describe that to us?
Yeah, show it, Stuart. That was it's a wonderful exercise. Let's all do it too. Okay.
I'm glad I wasn't standing in front of Craig, because he probably would have hit me with a book or something like that.
No, I wasn't. I knew exactly what you were talking about, because you hit me like a book. Okay.
What I was saying was I was just using an analogy for sensation, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And what I was saying was, you know, if you had a group, you know, if you were facilitating a group of people, if you paired them off into small groups, just pairs, like, okay, everybody pick a partner, find a place to sit in the room, and just, you know, reach out and just touch fingers.
We can do this ourselves though too.
You know, literally just touch fingers with your partner, and you know, I want you to describe what you feel, what you can tell me about this other person. And invariably, if you went around the room and listened to what was being spoken, people would probably be telling you, oh, you have a blue car and you live in a big house and there's a hill and you keep cattle and there's all that, you know, be amazing information coming out of it. But if you brought people back and said, okay, listen, can anybody just feel the fingertip? Can you feel the warmth of the person through the fingertip? You know, can you come back in and be here and now and experience life as it is right now? Not as out there and developing it with your mind, but just here in a very simple way right now. And that has an exercise, if you like, I was suggesting.
Well, what's the next one? Then we go put.
And you could do, to see, the thing is, everybody is already doing it. We're all connecting with life. Otherwise, you'd be in a box. You see, you'd be in a freezer somewhere. You'd be under the ground. Everybody's alive here. So we have this connection. It's happening right now. As you breathe in and out, it's happening right now. But we're all describing the house on the hill. We're not describing this.
Yes.
You see.
And how do I bring that into active imagination? I mean, now, Stuart, I want to do all of. Yeah.
By literally believing in yourself. What you're getting is what you're getting. That's it. There it is. It's happening. That's today's result. Now do it again tomorrow. And tomorrow it's happening again. And whatever you get tomorrow is tomorrow's result. There it is. It's happening. That's the description. And all the time, as a principle, if you like, within it, a best practice is to try to strip it down to its basics. Stop embroidering it. Stop adding the frills to it. Allow it just to be what it is, ordinary.
Do you feel your heart swell when you do this? I mean, I just feel my heart just full.
See, you're okay. So you're working within a sensation of aliveness.
Mhm.
You're working within the experience of aliveness. You're bringing yourself to the space. You're not trying to deny your presence. You're accepting your own aliveness within the space. In order for this to be, I have to be involved. So here I am, I'm alive. Now, can I feel this aliveness flowing into my work? Do I get a sense of this aliveness within what I'm doing? And I don't need to take a big step. I can be satisfied with a tiny movement because it's going to be wonderful. To see the expectation that we're putting on ourselves to try to be Olympic sprinters before we even put on a pair of runners. To see, let's move slowly. Let's practice slowly. Let's accept the slowness of it, and in the slowness it'll build. It's as simple as that. This is going to come to you if you ask for it, and it'll come to you in the way it will. Whatever way it's possible for this to emerge into your life, it will. Water will find its own way through the rock. That's how it works.
But I think as a sensate inferior function, I mean, this was a wonderful gift to me from Stuart. And you don't need another person to do it, although with another person, it's more electric. I didn't even think about that, but I mean, I want to do the whole thing, Stuart, okay?
Yeah.
I'm going to do the whole thing. Stuart first said to put your fingertips together, and what do you feel there? Just spend a moment just feeling what you feel, okay? And after you've done that for a little bit, now feel this. Okay, what do you feel when two hands, now you can imagine doing this with another person, stranger, and just feeling, just what do you feel? And not just what do you feel in your hands, but what do you feel in the rest of your body and in your heart? And do you feel your awareness moving from your brain down into your heart and to the lower parts of your body when you're just focusing on this feeling? And then Stuart said, what do you feel when you feel this? You know, feeling your two hands like that, and then feel that for a while.
You're getting
and then this one is the last one. You know, just hugging yourself.
Getting in touch with yourself, getting in touch with what's happening now.
It's interesting. It seems to be an intimate, almost sensuous act.
Yes.
That is being performed. And I've been holding this question for a while, and I know we're past some of this discussion, but you know, in this activity, is there ever really an integration with the ego and the self? Does it ever truly ever integrate? And when you guys are talking about grief, I'm thinking maybe grief would be a bridge in some way to integrate. I don't know. Tim had posted something earlier this week about we don't really have any rituals for dealing with grief. And I don't know what mythologies we can even draw from, or if there even are mythologies that we can draw from in this sense of how we can integrate. Or is this just a lifelong thing that we're always in the process of doing and we really can never get there? But Stuart made a great point earlier when he said, you know, what happens to the ego after it dies? You know, where does it find its place? And that's a fascination to me. I don't know if you guys have a thought about it.
I just like to say one thing, and then real quick is this is my own opinion, and is that, and Anna Marjula said it, the gates of paradise never open. There's no such thing as linear growth. You always return, like the Native Americans say, to the point you started at. You're always going in a circle. You always return to the point you started at. That's my experience from my own dreams, and it's my own intuition, is that you're just getting closer and closer to the center in a kind of a spiral, you know. So, but you never actually reach an end point. It's always a journey. In fact, I asked Patrick, and I asked him just because of that question that Steve just asked, is, does the journey ever end? you know, because I don't think it does. I just wanted to hear it from Patrick, what he thought. If the circular process is the permanent state. But go ahead, Stuart, what do you think?
Well, I just, in my response to Steve is, again, the shifting of perspective sometimes can give a different point, does give a different point of view. So to see our thinking as inherently separated, we're all the time creating this separation from wholeness. So and then we strive after wholeness. But what if we were to look at this moment as being complete? What if we were to take this moment of life as absolutely complete in itself? This is the manifestation of life, exactly as life wishes. Nothing to be to strive after in this moment. Just to accept that, to know that. If I say accept it, well, then I'm striving after something, to do something. But the acceptance, the knowing that this is complete, I think is an interesting other thought to nurture within ourselves. Because
And you know, those are two kinds of gods, and both, according to Agnella Jaffe, are perfectly acceptable. One was Parmenides, where who had this unchanging God, you know, and it was always the same. And the other one was of Jung's God, was Heraclitus, which was an ever-changing God. A God that the God that you meet tomorrow is not the same God you met yesterday. You know, that this God is always changing, ever becoming, that life is a becoming thing. Now, what Agnella Jaffe says, they don't contradict each other. The unchanging God and the God that changes every day don't contradict each other. And she said it was more where Erich Neumann, who was Jung's best student, his God was Parmenides. Jung's God was this ever-changing God. And it's I think it's typological, but it is it has they both are valid concepts. But anyway, what do you think about that, Stuart?
I think there's, yeah, I get what you're saying. My response to that would be is we need both.
Yes.
So in a sense, the knowing that everything is well, that everything is already done, that everything is perfect, that I don't need to add to it or take from it or be in conflict with it. That gives tremendous stability. It brings tremendous peace into my life, and it allows for us to have a self-belief in ourselves. It allows us to create ourselves without constantly pulling ourselves down as not good enough for this, that, or the other. And then to, for us to accept the becoming in life, that everything changes, the whole impermanence of everything, including myself, my own belief, my point of view, is the beginning of experiencing joy. It's the experience of a joyful arising of renewal, that once I accept everything, that everything changes. It means I can accept the death of everything, which immediately brings me into the renewal of life within myself, that everything is perfect within itself again. Here I am again in a new moment, different. There's thinking that happens beyond thinking. Do you see, if I'm just working with a basic understanding, well, then I'm never going to move into realizing. But when I can get into this sort of state of realizing my own thoughts, it's like having come to a completion point within my own thinking, where I begin to know something. Well, now that's solid for me. That's I can say that that's my experience of it. And that gives me ground within myself, so that I can be groundless. I can't step into a place of being groundless until I've discovered some ground in myself. Now, maybe that's also the experience of life that has happened, the maturity and, life's journey as it begins to sort of cook away within us, it gives us this sense of ground so that we can be groundless. But there's, you know, there's, everybody has it. You know, I'm sure if a newborn baby could speak, what would they speak of? They'd probably talk about their experience in the womb. Oh, that flipping those 9 months. Wait till I tell you what happened to me. You know, and then wait till I tell you what happened at the end of it. You know, wow. They'd have a whole story going on. And there's the body speaking. There's the biology of a physical consciousness speaking. So you know, the small and the big, the knowing and the not knowing, the becoming and the already
Unbecoming. I want
Yeah.
Patrick to tell when Gary does it. Patrick told us today about non-becoming, and I want to hear what he said, because he said that that's as important as becoming.
But you see,
Non-becoming.
I still am not fully remembering everything
Yes,
that was.
but when you, Gary, if you're going to do the transcript, I would really like to hear what he said about non-becoming. Well, do we want to have a quick last words from everybody? Miles, do you have any quick last words?
Oh yeah, well, this is really powerful. I've promised my wife and my family that I'll stop taking notes. I said that again last night, and here I am. I've got 2 pages. But anyway, I started active imagination, but mine hasn't been colored yet. It's still a lot of work to do. I very much appreciated what you said, Craig, about the apathetic and ignorant ego. And I'll be able to rest and be, you know, in the state of acceptance that Stuart mentioned once I've actually got this active imagination out there, you know, just put it out there and then just say, okay, well, at least I tried. So yeah, I could go on, but thank you very much. And then one final thing, the statement about Stuart said, don't go into the center of the grief, just nibble around the edges.
Yes.
Very helpful for me, because I'm always on the edge of just getting all choked up and teary-eyed and even maybe blubbering. And so, you know, I'll just keep that in mind, you know, just stay on the edges, don't go too deep, and people can understand.
It's kind of a wallowing. That's why my wife is not happy with people who wallow in it. You know, nibbling on the edges sounds better. Well, Tim or Gary, do you have a couple quick last words?
I wanted to, this reminds me of a wonderful statement my mom made. She died about 15 years ago. But one thing I'll always remember that she said is about guilt. And I'm thinking about it in the same terms of as grief here. She said about guilt, guilt is like fine chocolate. It's okay to have a little now and then, but don't binge. And it seems like that's maybe a good way of looking at grief, that, you know, we all carry around a great deal of grief. And if you just plunge into the deep end, it's kind of like Patrick was saying, or Stuart was saying about the, you know, just jumping off the boat before you learn how to swim. Yes. But just nibbling around the edges is maybe really helpful. And another thing I'm thinking about is I too have sensation as my inferior function. And it seems as though one of the problems I have with active imagination is it's so verbal. And I like the idea of drawing and using color, but I'm also thinking about other ways of creating like little private rituals that are more sensate, that are about manipulating materials or doing something with my body or carrying out some activity in the outer world that honors what's going on, or my search in the inner world.
There's always a missing friend. That was what Ivan had. There's a missing friend. And that when you bring the missing friend into the active imagination, the function that's missing, it makes it come alive. You know, Gary, did you have any closing statements?
Yeah, actually, I'll just
Anybody else?
add on
Yeah, go
what Tim said. And you know, because sensation's also my inferior function, so I've been trying to deal with it. And like one of the things that you know that I like to do, and I put a link up in that, you know, where it has some notes up there, but you know, are these chakra dances, and like, you know, you can also there's also like an MP4. I've just been listening to the recording. But, and, you know, and she's dancing really fast, but I find for myself that, you know, like I really prefer really super slow movements so I can really feel what I'm doing. But, you know, what
Almost
she's
Tai
getting
Chi like.
yeah, she's getting this visualization that goes with it. And so, you know, it's like, it's kind of a lightweight act of imagination because someone else is generating the images, which you're then feeling. But then the other thing that, you know, and this is a little bit strange, but it's kind of it's a meditation, and it's called the fox walk. And what you do is you literally walk as slowly as you can. You know, you're maybe covering, I don't know, a quarter mile an hour. I mean, it's slow. But the idea is to feel each foot as it just barely goes down, and then as the balance transfers and stuff. And the idea is to get very much into your body. And it's, you know, and you know, especially for, you know, a sensation, you know, sensate inferior function people.
I feel a wave of energy just from you describing it.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think it's really good because it's like, because we have problems getting into our body, and yet, and even the finger thing, you know, it's like your attention's going to drift pretty fast. But this is like, you know, in order to do it, your awareness and attention has to go with it continually.
Well, Stuart, Steve, or Ivan, you have any closing comments, and then we'll end?
Well, I just want to thank you guys for a very stimulating conversation. I mean,
Yes,
this is
great.
This thought of finding sanctuary in the moment in an impermanent world is fascinating to me.
Yes.
And it's a completely different way to really look at wholeness and even the transcendent function. So thank you. Thank you, guys.
Read the 6th exercise about just what you said about that. But Stuart or Ivan? Oh, Ivan, why don't you go ahead?
I'd echo that. I'd also add, I was recently given a piece of advice that I thought was helpful here for feeling, which was to sometimes just meditate for 10 seconds at a time, sort of like what Stuart was describing with the fingers. Is like a meditation can be as small as just saying, like, for 10 seconds, I'm going to do some form of meditation to get back into feeling. I felt for me that's a really helpful experience to just ground myself throughout the day and get back to a little bit out of the rational mind and more into the feeling mind, for lack of a better word. And just I've been finding this really really interesting and really helpful. I've been, you know, working with my dreams a lot, and I've been finding a lot about myself by doing that. So thank you for this.
Well, Stuart, you got the last word.
Okay, so what I would say is just to go back to Ivan's dream, and just the dream with the no walls in the house, whatever that was. I'm not familiar with the dream, but what struck me about it was to talk to the foundations.
Yes,
I thought
beautiful.
Really,
oh man, that's beautiful.
Okay. Let's have a chat with the foundations.
Chat with the it is beautiful. I mean, I just felt goose pimples all over my body when you said that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm seriously.
Dream. I think it's a great dream to be able to work with. Anyway, that was it. That's, you know,
okay.
Great conversation. That was it.
Oh, okay. Well, great. Next time, we'll just quickly go through all Barbara Hannah's doing is giving us some examples of active imagination. Then we'll go back to a little bit of ally work. But I just thought we'd take a quick break, and it's very easy reading. So anyway, thanks everybody, and we'll keep. See you next time. Okay. Bye-bye.